Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Biblio Fitness. Hope everyone's had a great day and made some tremendous gains. So today we're getting to the last few sections that I wanted to discuss before we wrap up the dawn of day. I've already finished it, and I'm still I'm still processing it all. But yeah, today is section 559, which is titled Nothing in Excess. And before I continue, if you haven't read Nietzsche, I highly suggest you do. And I know I sound like an insult, but this is the most profound book I've ever read. It caught me at a time when I was at my most curious and to be completely honest, my most desperate. In a way, not desperate as in like everything was crumbling around me, but desperate because I wanted to break the mold. I wanted to break away from myself and my previous notions of what is good and evil, or what is success, or what makes me a good person, or what makes me useful, and all these other questions that we continuously ask ourselves, and we continuously fail a lot of the time because we don't realize that we have adopted views from others, and the ego of others is far more important than our own ego. There is a certain virtue in selfishness. There is a high virtue in selfishness, and that goes completely contrary to the message of the group, of the community, of the state, and whatnot. And this man has allowed me to ask those questions to myself, and to break through, because you do have to ask those very difficult questions of what makes me tick, and what am I insecure about, and who am I trying to appease still, or what am I trying to run away from. And those are all very dangerous, and all you have to stare into the abyss of the soul for a very long time in order to figure that out. But this man has helped me through that the very beginning, which I believe is sometimes the most difficult, right? Is the confrontation of the reality of the situation, and the realities of the answers to those questions that I just previously mentioned, and then overcoming such things. Because I can easily become a nihilist. I don't, morality means nothing to me. Religion means nothing to me. And I can't go back to such things. I can't go back to morality. I can't go back to the Christian slave morality. It's like once you take a bite out of the apple, to use a Christian pun, you can't go back. There is no going back. There is no tricking oneself into believing such absurdities, in my opinion. And so at the end, it becomes individual responsibility. And I like Nietzsche because it goes away from the importance of group think to individual think, to individuality, and to realize that the only person that's going to be able to solve this shit is you, nobody else. People could give you advice, but at the end of the day, man, you have to figure it out. And how hungry are you to figure out these answers? And the answers that I come up for myself may not be the answers for somebody else, and that's perfectly fine. I'm not trying to create a universal dogma. One can only hope to set the groundwork for the next generation to be able to completely overshadow you. That's all we can ever hope to do, right? And so, before, my apologies for that tangent, but yeah, this book is extremely insightful. And I'm going to continue with this amazing project of mine of, reading these realpolitik individuals, because that's what I'm more interested in. I do want to read like Plato and Spinoza and Descartes, who were in the closet Christians, and I mean many people have made that distinction, or claimed that distinction, that for all the logic and reason supposedly used within the philosophy of Descartes and Spinoza, they were trying to justify the existence of God at the end of the day, like Immanuel Kant, right? I have The Prince, which I kind of feel like reading. I feel like it would be quite fun for us to go through together. The Prince, a very impactful and famous book that I honestly have not gone through it all. I've not read the whole thing, so I feel like it's only appropriate given well, I mean, for the past few months, the content that I've been spewing, and probably switch it up. I like to switch it up. Before this, I was reading the Brothers Karamazov, which is very different. But yeah, so yeah, today's subject is for number 559, which is titled "Nothing in Excess." And quote, how often is the individual recommended to set up a goal which it is beyond his power to reach, in order that he may at least attain that which lies within the scope of his abilities and in his most strenuous efforts? Is it really so desirable, however, that he should do so? Do not the best men who try to act according to this doctrine, together with their best deeds, necessarily assume a somewhat exaggerated and distorted appearance on account of their excessive tension? And in the future, will not a gray mist of failure envelop the world, owing to the fact that we may see everywhere struggling athletes and tremendous gestures, but nowhere a conqueror crowned with the laurel and rejoicing in his victory? End quote. I feel like this is speaking to the whole reality, because with religion and certain philosophies, I suppose, or religions in general, I feel like one of the big tenets taught is that nothing is possible without God. Us humans cannot possibly attain our greatest desires alone. And I feel like with that sort of thinking in mind, we come up with these grandiose objectives that we know to be false. We know that is not attainable. But we hope that, with God's favor, we are able to get within reach. You could see that even with the construction and the continuation of ideals, right? You will never reach the ideal. All you could do is hope to get there. But there will always be that sense of frustration. And he says that the exaggeration of trying to get there as fast as you can and being utterly frustrated because you'll never reach. You'll never get there. It's a failed endeavor. And with that in mind, man, I feel like it becomes somewhat of a negative, it flips negatively on you because now you're seeing yourself always as a failure. Instead of being realistic with expectations in relations to your capabilities, your natural tendencies, and your skill and your competence, right? What can you achieve rationally? Let's use reason, even though reason is built on unreason, but whatever. What can you reasonably accomplish? What goals can you reasonably reach within a specific time frame? So that you can rejoice in your victory because you'll eventually get there. You're not reaching out for some grandiose bullshit that you'll never, in the back of your head, that you're never going to get there. All you know what I'm saying, is just like some sort of kick for you to at least try. But it's a doomed project. And, I like how he says that, that's why we see everywhere struggling athletes and tremendous gestures and overcompensation for the realization that, this is a failed goal. You're not going to reach this goal. And, I feel like, it's a lot to ask from people to be realistic. And it's a lot to ask for people to no longer be idealistic. We are so used to having to have this metaphysical or transcendental ideal or to be chasing that is very different and very difficult to flip it, right? To no longer need those ideals and no longer need that God head for you to push forward, flatten everything out and be a naturalist, right? Be someone realistic, be chasing towards something that betters you reasonably, right? What are things that I'm into? What are my weaknesses? What are my strengths? What are all these factors into play so that you could set actual goals, not lofty, dumbass, ridiculous goals. You could see that frustration, now that I think about it, with even great conquerors, right? Like a Genghis Khan. A man that was prophesized to one day rule the world, and that's why they were like a bunch of crackheads trying to rampage through China and Asia and the rest of Asia and into Eastern Europe, into Russia, into the Middle East, and continuously pressing, and you see that feverish, that desperate push to try to achieve that goal. Like Genghis Khan created one of the largest empires in history, and he died considering himself a failure because he did not conquer the world. Instead of being able to rejoice in his victory. And I'm not going to get into the semantics of whether he was a good or bad person and the whole, all that rampaging and pillaging stuff. But that's not the point of today's conversation. But a man that, whatever your moral sensibilities are, a man that is immortalized, a man that's going to live on until this civilization fails. And he considered himself a failure. Look at Alexander the Great, a man that wanted to be like a Dionysius, right? To push on further than anyone ever did, even further than the gods themselves. Dionysius, the man that would traverse everywhere. And he also died probably considering himself a failure, because he didn't conquer the world. He wanted to keep pushing. If it wasn't for his army saying, like, dude, if you keep going, we're going to kill you, and we're just going to turn back around. He wanted to keep pushing through India. He apparently, before his death, some people speculate that he was making drawing up a campaign to take over Afghanistan. A man that probably considered himself a failure, even with all the great accomplishments that he made. The fact that he made these ideals, Genghis Khan, with these metaphysical transcendental ideals, these ideals beyond the scope of possibility for a single individual in the short time that we have. They weren't able to rejoice in the crowning of victory and the conquest and the impact that they have made in history because of that ideal. Because of making these ridiculous goals that probably in the back of their mind they knew they weren't going to be able to, even though back then, who am I to look gay? Who am I to take in the position of a man that existed thousands of years ago, especially as religious as the Macedonians and Greeks were at that time? Obviously, you have the whole story of Arian's book on the campaigns of Alexander and him, thrown, when he arrives at Egypt and he goes to the oracle at one of the oases or some shit, that he's been prophesized as the son of the pharaoh, the son of Zeus, and all this stuff. Religion was used far more as a justification for whatever action that we did, right? Bad omens. Look at the Spartans. People think Spartans are hardcore, but those imbeciles would not go to war if the omens did not favor them. I laughed so hard when I was reading the Peloponnesian War by Thucydides, and right before a great battle, like 2 times in a row, one of their fucking allies getting ransacked by the Athenians. They're like, oh no, the omens are not favorable for us. We're turning around and going back home. Like, what the fuck? Like, but that seemed reasonable to people back then. And it just shows how relative everything is, right? How relative even morality is. But I digress. This shows to me that to be realistic in goals. And I know people say that all the time, but I feel like people always throw up lofty goals for no fucking reason. But to remind themselves, and I feel like this is a habit enabled by Christianity, that humans are a failure and humans can only ever hope to reach success and victory through the grace of God, which I feel like is a disgusting notion, but some people like to live that way. And yeah, that'll be all for today's subject or topic of nothing in excess. I do hope you have a great day. Make tremendous gains, and hopefully very soon we will start The Prince. I have that book. I was gonna buy The Ego and the Soul by Stirner, but I'm gonna buy it after I finish these next couple of books. Why am I gonna keep buying if I have things to read? I need to stop. It's like an impulse that I need to control. But love y'all guys. Hope y'all make great gains. And until next time, peace.